Okay, let's start the lecture now. So today in this lecture, we will discuss about different methods which are used to filter data which is coming into the system or which is coming into the network or going out of the network. So how we can filter that data? We generally we define different rules. On the basis of that, we uh, we filter the data, that which data should be given access to the system and which data should not be given access to the system. So in this way, uh, there's a we can say a device or it is a piece of software is used to handle that situation, and that is installed on some device like router or for example or on a system. So this is used to filter different traffic that is coming into the system or going out of the system. So what's the purpose of the firewall? Its main purpose is to control and monitor the traffic that is coming into the system and that is going out of the system. So there are the different connections are established between different networks through these devices like routers and gateways, and these you can say firewalls are installed on the routers on or on the gateways. So whenever any data comes into the network, so it is first filtered by the firewall. Then after that, that is given access or that is allowed to enter into the system or that is allowed to enter into the network. So in this way, we can define different firewalls at different layers. For example, we can define the firewall at the network layer. We can define the firewall for example, at the application layer, or we can find the firewall at the you can say port level or you can say TCP layer. So they are the different layers, as you know that. So where we can install the firewall and that is working on that. For example, it can filter the data on the basis of IP address. It can filter the data on the basis of the port number, or it can filter the data on the basis of the application that is used to access into the system. So in this way, uh, we have also other type of firewall which may use different these firewalls at different situations. So we can have such type of firewall that is called dynamic packet filter. So this figure further explain that how the firewall works. For example, there's a device installed over here. That could be a router or that could be a gateway. For example, any data is coming into this network, that is a public network, and there's a private network. So any data coming here, so that is filtered by this router, and when it is given access or when it is permitted to enter into the system, it then it get an access of that particular system. So in this way, it can be analyzed or it can be monitored or it can be controlled by the router through different routes which are defined in the firewall. So that may define that, for example, that particular address, host with having that particular address should be given access to the system or to the network, or host with a particular address that should not be given access to the system. So in this way, we have picked type of firewalls. These type of firewalls are called packet filter firewalls. So generally, they analyze the packet of the data that is coming into the network, the packet of the host that is sending the data. So it consists of different feeds. So it may analyze different feeds, and on the basis of those different feeds, it can also access to the system. For example, there's a source address, there's a destination address, and there's also some other information related to the protocols. And for example, the port numbers which are used uh, by the, you can say, host or program to access particular system or particular program in the system or in the network. Or for example, there are some other connections are established between sender uh, and for example a network. So they can also analyze such type of connections, either these connections are active connections or passive connections, and also analyze the message of the data. So actually, basically, this type of firewall is filter the data on the basis of the packet, on the basis of the packet that is sent it from the source to the destination. So, for example, it may contain the source address, or it may contain the destination address. For example, from where the data is coming, from where the packet is coming. So it analyze that their particular address, their particular source address, or for example where the data is sent it. So it also analyze that particular address. So it has a list of different addresses which are in the firewall table, for example. So it contains which addresses should be given access to the system, or which addresses should not be given access to the system, or for example which processes can be accessed in the system, or which processes cannot be given access to the system. So in this way we have different interfaces which are used by the packet filter firewall. For example, the interfaces from where data is coming, the interfaces from where data is going to other network, for example. So they are incoming interfaces from where data is coming, outgoing interfaces from where data is going to other networks. So in this way, on those interfaces, the different filtering is performed. On that particular filtering is performed on the basis of the packet. For example, it has a different feed, so it can apply different methods to filter that particular packet, or to filter that particular data which is coming to access to the system, or which is coming to access to the network. So in this way, these type of firewalls, we can define different rules for those packets, so it can filter that those packets on the basis of the rules which we define in the firewall. Now, how we configure different firewalls, like for example, packet filter firewall. So we define different policies, different security policies, and which contain rules about different fields that, for example, which users should be given access to the system, or which users should not be given access to the system, or for example which packets should be allowed to enter the system, or which packets should not be given access to the system. So in this way we define different privileges, different permissions for the particular packets, or for the particular host to enter into the system and to access different services of the system. And for example, here the example is given here of particular rules which are defined for particular system. For example, we define different rules here. As you can see, the different rules which contains the action to be performed, either to allow the particular packet or to block, for example, particular packet, or to limit the access of the particular packet, which port which host should be given access, or which port should not be given access, which port should be given access, which port should not be given access. So in this way, we have a different host. For example, there's a, for example, a host that is given access into the system, or any data that is being out of the system, or any packet send it to other networks. So that's why we have there's a host which is sending to data to other system, or there's a user which is sending data to other system, or there's a user which is accessing the data of our network, for example. So in this way, we have a source address, and we have a destination address, and that source address and the destination address that is filtered on on the router, for example, on the basis of the different rules uh, which are defined by the firewall, for example. For example, here uh, there's an example is further given here. Uh, there's a particular address, for example, that is given access, or for example, here there's a uh, there's a gateway, for example, which is used to connect the system to other network, for example, and there's a host which is used to be accessed into the system, and then there's a port number uh, which is used to be accessed by the system. For example, this example is used, for example, when we send an email to other system. So then, for example, we define this rule, which is actually given an access to a user to send an email to other user. So, for example, here we are defining that particular port number, a particular host, for example, is sending the data or sending the email to other system. So then he should be given an access to send an email to other system. So in this way, we can define that for example, there's a SMTP protocol that is used for sending an email to other systems. So that is given permission, that is allowed to send an email to other system, and that particular user which is sending the email to other system, and he's allowed to send the email to other systems. So in this way, we can define different rules for that. Or for example, there's another example is given here that is used to allow any access, or any access into the system, for example, into the network, for example. So in this way, there's a particular port number is defined, which is given an access. A particular uh, protocol is used, which is given an access to the system. For example, if we are sending an email to other user, so we can define a rule like as we discussed in previous slide. Or if we want allow a user to send an email to us, for example, so then we define the rule like this. So there's a incoming data, and there's outgoing data. So on the basis of that, we define that data, we define that particular rule, that either the particular packet is accessed uh, are entering into the system, or that is filtered by the firewall to enter into the system, or for example, any packet is actually that is filtered uh, uh, by the firewall to go to another network. So in this way, we have different rules which are defined uh, whenever we define a particular firewall, and we define different rules for that. So we have different data, which is either incoming data, we have outgoing data. So we define different rules for the incoming data, and we also define the different rules for the outgoing data. So in this way, we have different rules which are defined, and we will define the rules on the basis of the particular address, for example, or on the basis of particular port number, for example. And then after defining particular address and particular port number, we define different rules. Like for example, here there's another example is given here. For example, here this particular rule defines that if any email that is received by the you can say a user in the network, so that is allowed to give an access to the network. Or for example, he can also send an email to other system in other networks. So a user is allowed to send an email, and user is also allowed to receive an email. So in this way, we have defined this rule that the particular port number, for example, there's 25 port number for the source and for the destination, and for the protocol like SMTP, which is used to send an email to other system. So whenever we want to define a rule like that, where we define that either the particular user can send an email to other user, or can receive an email from other users. So how we can define these rules? We define these rules like this as which are defined here. So here we allow SMTP protocol to be access or to send the data to other network, or from where we can receive the data. So in this way, we have different protocols defined, which can be filtered by the firewall, or different port numbers which are defined in the firewall, which can be filtered, or which can be given access to the system, or which can not be given access to the system. So in this way, we have different protocols are used here. So so uh, different, you can say, rules are defined here. So it is very important to define the rules properly, so that the attacker should not access to the system, or the user which is not a legitimate user, so he cannot access to the system. So we will define a particular packet so that the address should not be spoofed, or the particular address should not be accessed by a user to get an access or to get the control of the network. So in this way, we define or we filter the packets, and we try to block the particular address, or to block the particular port number, which is which we have a suspicion that that particular address or particular the host with the particular address or with the particular port number could be an intruder, or could be an taker. So in this way, we can define different rules at and we can define security at the router by defining the different rules of the firewall. So we have different IP addresses can be defined, can be filtered, and the port numbers can be filtered. For example, if any packet that is coming with different having source address and destination address, and the port number, source uh, and destination port number. So in this way, we can also filter that particular packet, or filter that particular data on the basis of the port number as well. For example, if any data is coming to access to the system, if it has a particular port number, so we can also define that that particular port number should be given an access to the system. For example, every process or every protocol or every service has the particular port number. On that port number that is accessing the data, or that is making connection to other system. So we define that, so we can filter the data on the basis of that particular port number. And we define, as we discuss about the emails, for example, either the particular email can be send it to other network, or particular email can be received by the other user. So in this way, we have defined rules at that level, at that particular application level, or at that protocol, that the particular protocol or particular process or particular application is given access to access the system. So in this way, we have we need to define different rules for the firewall, for the packets which are entered into the system, which are coming into the system, which are going out of the system. So we have some other rules, like for example, as we have defined, there are the uh, different packets where we have different connections are established between sender and receiver. And there's a packet that is, for example, which is sent it from sender to receiver. For example, there's a stateful packet. Filtering is, for example, this type of filtering is that it contains information about the particular packet. So on the basis of that, we filter a particular packet. So there's another type of packet filter, that is a statelet, for example, that is, for example, uses the particular information that is contained in the packet, while there's a stateful packet which contains information on the you can say about the user, for example, in the packet, and then we filter the packet on the basis of that. For example, this figure here further explain that how we can filter the particular packet here. For example, it is sent it by the user with this particular address, and it is using the this particular protocol, and it uses it this particular port number, source port number, and destination port number. And there's a source address and there's a destination address, and that uses a UDP protocol, and that sends the data to other user. And after that, when it sends the data to other user, like for example, there's a client is used here and there's a server is here. So it's the client sends the data to the server, and that is received by the server, and then the server sends the data to the client, for example. So it defines a different rule here. For example, it is defining that particular rule that, for example, if it is a particular source address or source that should be given an access to the system, if it is a particular destination address that is given an access to the system. So here, this particular packet is actually is not given an access to the system. It is not allowed to enter into the system, and it is not allowed to be used by a particular user, because it not matches the rule which is defined in the network. So we have defined different packets for that, or different rules for that, which is defined for the particular firewall, which has defined different rules. And when any data or any packet that is coming into the network, that is accessing the data into the network, so if it matches with the rules which are defined in the firewall, for example, then it will be given an access to the system. So if it does not matches the rules which are defined in the firewall, then it will not be given access to the system. So in this way, we have a packet filtering where we define different rules which are based on the source address and destination address, or the source port number and the destination port number. Or for example, the protocol which is used to access particular application. So we also define rule on the basis of that. So in this way, we filter a particular packet, and where we define a particular packet having a particular, you can say, rules which are defined. So in this way, we have packet filtering firewall. So we have also other type of firewalls as well, as we discuss that what are the different other firewalls which are used at different other layers. For example, at the transport layer or at the application layer. So this firewall is working. The packet filter firewall is working at the application, at the transport, the network layer, while other firewalls, like as we discuss, like circuit gateway or application gateway, they are working at different other layers. So we will discuss them also. So if you have any question up to now, then you can ask.
Sir, what does mean by filtering?
Here, that means that if any packet is coming into the network, so that is actually monitored by the router, or that is monitored by the gateway which is coming into the network. So that monitors that particular gateway, or that particular packet, or which is coming into the network, or which is accessing into the network, or that on the basis of the different rules. So when it monitors that particular packet on the basis of different rules, so that process is actually called the filtering. So it actually filters, or for example, it actually checks for particular packet, that either the particular packet should be given an access to the system, or the particular packet should not be given an access to the system. So for that purpose, we define different rules in the firewall, that for example, that particular IP address, particular IP address having this source address, or the destination address, or that particular port number, uh, or that particular application or particular protocol which is given an access to the system. So that is given, that is allowed, or that is permitted to access particular system or not. So this is actually that is means this process is actually to monitor monitor the packet, or to check the packet that either that particular packet is actually the packet that should be given an access to the system.